Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
From the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide in Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow.
Hyde at Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York.
I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg Technology.
Coming up, we have an exclusive interview with the CEO of Micron. Sanjay Mehrotra is going to be joining us as shares surge to a record high. That's after the company boosted its outlook on AI growth.
Plus, we push ahead to Reddit's long-awaited IPO and sit down with Reddit COO Jen Wong later this hour.
And of course, we go live to the Department of Justice as they announce an antitrust lawsuit against Apple.
We're also thinking a lot about Micron. Shares of Micron at a record high, biggest jump since 2011. The outlook for the fiscal third quarter, a recovery in commoditized DRAM prices, but also a ramp in the next generation HBM3E. That is the memory that supports the GPUs in training AI. That is the conversation that we'll have. Let's dive right into Micron's earnings with CEO Sanjay Mehrotra. Sanjay, good morning to you, and that's how I'd frame it. Let's get right to the outlook for the fiscal third. Weigh up the factors for us. Was this all about the recovery in DRAM, traditionally commoditized, or is this more about the ramp up in HBM3E that is going in support of things like the H200 from NVIDIA?
First of all, thank you, Caroline and Ed, for having me on the show here. Our recovery is really driven by a demand related to AI with tight supply and actually demand that is strong across most of our end markets, particularly data center driven demand. And Micron has a strong portfolio of products. Very excited about our latest offering of HBM3E that you referred to earlier. We have just begun shipments of this, and we see strong growth in the several quarters that are ahead of us. And supply is tight. The leading edge nodes in particular are in tight supply. That's leading to price increases as well. So as we look ahead at 2024, our year of recovery, we see increasing prices driven by the demand supply fundamentals. And we look at 2025 to be a record year for Micron's revenue with significantly improved profitability as well.
2025 supply also mostly already allocated. You sold out on 2024, Sanjay. Just let's dig in on the high bandwidth memory, because, what was it, Jason Huang over at NVIDIA calling this a technology miracle. Will it not get commoditized? Will prices remain elevated?
First of all, it's our HBM product that is sold out for calendar year 24, and vast majority of the supply for our 2025 is allocated as well. This is a critical product. HBM3E is in very, very early stages here, and it's key enabler of what AI platforms, generative AI platforms are able to do. Just think about it. I mean, the latest Blackwell platform that has been announced, it has 64 die of memory in it. So tremendous amount of silicon. HBM is growing fast, expected to be about 15%, high teens, mid to high teens of the industry revenue over the course of next several years, compared to being just half of that last year. And as you look ahead at the new platforms being announced, NVIDIA earlier this week, Broadcom yesterday, they're all placing tremendous emphasis on the performance and the power of HBM memory. As AI becomes bigger, data becomes bigger. Data lives in the products that Micron makes for AI applications, lives in the kind of products such as HBM3E, but high-density DIMM modules,
right,
as well as other products that Micron makes, DDR5 memory and data center SSDs. So AI is really driving tremendous growth trajectory. HBM3E is absolutely going to be critical. This is in very early innings. And, you know, even if there are any perturbations in supply, they will get absorbed over time. And what's important to understand is, because HBM3 HBM3E product is extremely silicon intensive across the industry, it is really leaving not enough supply for non-HBM products, and those are in tight supply. And that's what is driving a tremendous strength in terms of demand-supply fundamentals and pricing trajectory for memory.
And the question is, Sanjay, how do you keep up, right? HBM3E running at 5.2 gigabits per second. You've already mentioned Blackwell. You're going to have to bring that next generation HBM 9 gigabits per second faster. Just walk us through the real-term ramp of your products, getting them into the real world, and when they show up in your financials in the near and medium term.
Well, we talked about yesterday in our earnings call that we have begun shipments of HBM3E product. It's an industry-leading product. It has the best performance and the lowest power in the industry, which, you know, for data center applications, power is critical. 30% better power for our HBM3E product. So we have really long legs in this HBM3E product for foreseeable future here. And HBM3E has begun shipments, and we mentioned in the call yesterday that it will be accretive to our gross margins, and we'll have several $100 million of revenue of this HBM3E product in our fiscal year, which will end in August timeframe. And of course, we look at significant growth ahead for HBM3E as well. Our production has begun. We are extremely focused on continuing to ramp this product. Our target is to get our share in HBM3E equivalent to our DRAM industry share, and we're going to remain extremely disciplined. Key will be absolutely managing the supply and demand fundamentals overall for the DRAM industry. So we look at strong growth ahead for our HBM3E. Keep in mind that HBM is expected to have a CAGR greater than 50% over the course of next few years in terms of bit growth that HBM will be driving. Of course, it will be all the Gen AI applications that will be driving this. And I just want to add here that of course, data center is a big driver of our growth. We are shifting our business more toward data center given the demand and the profitability profile of that part of the market. We are doing that with our DRAM products as well as with our SSDs. But just want to point out that other markets, such as smartphones and PCs, they too are implementing AI-enabled devices. And you'll start seeing them coming out from later this year. And of course, 2025 will be the first full year of all these devices on the edge, such as AI-enabled smartphones and PCs. They take much higher memory content than their prior generation devices.
You're really
so we are
articulating
excited
here
about the opportunities for that AI enables for us, enables for memory, which is at the heart of AI revolution in terms of from data center all the way to the edge.
Going back, though, to this high bandwidth memory and going back to that market share that you say you want to own, can you articulate exactly what that share is going to be for our audience right now when we have Hynix, Samsung likely to be unveiling their products at the first half of this year?
Our share in DRAM today in the industry is approximately 23%, and we are targeting that our HBM share would be in line with that DRAM industry share. Of course, it will be ramping gradually over time. Sometime in 2025, we expect to be getting to our share in HBM equivalent to DRAM share. It's a product that has greater profitability, and as we said, it really will be a driver of our revenue and profit growth, along with the rest of the market that has strengthening fundamentals as well.
For our Bloomberg television and radio
and let me
audience,
just point out, the most important thing is that our product has leadership specs, and that's why it's getting a strong customer pull. Leadership products, again, in terms of performance, bandwidth being about 10% better than other competitive products, power being 30% lower. Data centers today take up about 3% of the world's energy. Over the course of next several years, expected to continue to increase, getting to closer to high single-digit percentage. That's where memory becomes extremely important in making sure that these accelerators for Gen AI are running lower power. Low power memory, our 30% lower power solution is extremely attractive to our customers.
Sanjay, for our Bloomberg television and radio audience worldwide, you can point out a lot of things. We have a lot of questions for you, so bear with us. Let's go back to on-device, because you clearly want to talk about that. We talk about on-device a lot on this program, the smartphone and PC context. You are saying that there is a tangible benefit that you're seeing in orders for that. But is that happening right now? There is a lot of skepticism that on-device processing of LLMs and generative AI tools is some way away. Are you telling us that this is material now, or you're predicting that it's coming soon?
Well, earlier this year, you saw Samsung S24 getting announced at Mobile World Congress. Honor announced its Magic 6 Pro. And these are great examples where AI is being implemented, great examples of inferencing on the edge. AI is being implemented that's intent-based. And that's really going to drive tremendous opportunity. Of course, these kind of high-end next-gen AI capabilities and PCs and smartphones will start getting into the marketplace later this year. 2025 will become the first full year. Over the course of next few years, next few short years, we would see that AI-enabled devices will be representing, let's say, about a third of smartphones and PC markets, and they take much more content, anywhere from 40% to 100% more content in flagship AI-enabled PCs and smartphones versus flagship AI and PC devices today.
Sanjay, we've got
flagship smartphone and PC devices today.
We've got a couple more key questions, and we're going to keep it tight for you, Sanjay, because we have been thinking about the CHIPS Act. We've been thinking about Intel getting that money. We've been thinking about you still building out in China and in India. Will you still be committed to putting money into Boise, into New York as well? Are you going to get the money from the government?
Well, with respect to the CHIPS Act and our previously announced plans for leading-edge memory manufacturing in Boise and in the Syracuse area, our application for CHIPS Act is under processing with the CHIPS Program Office, making good progress there. Of course, we'll make the announcements when that process is completed. Important thing is that CHIPS Act enables us to bring, with CHIPS Act grants, sufficient level of CHIPS Act grants, investment tax credits, and local state government support, it helps bridge the cost gap with Asia operations. So it helps us bring leading-edge memory manufacturing into semiconductors. And of course, that creates many jobs. It supports economic as well as national security. And memory is pivotal. We just talked about how pivotal memory is to AI applications. So think about it. Today, only 2% of world's memory, total world's memory production, is here in the U.S. Of course, it's all by Micron at our facility in Manassas, Virginia. With CHIPS Act support, as we expand our leading-edge memory manufacturing in Boise and Syracuse, next decade, sometime in next decade, we'll be able to get to 10%, over 10% of world's leading-edge memory production here in the U.S. And that's really significantly moving the needle. And Micron, of course, is committed to that.
Sanjay, we're running out of time here. Bloomberg's reported that the U.S. is considering restricting one of your Chinese rivals, CXMT. My understanding is that Micron has been in support of that. Could you just outline Micron's position on the US restricting CXMT?
Look, the governments make their own decision, and we are not going to speculate or speak on behalf of any of the government actions. What we can tell you is that, of course, China is an important market for us, just like China is an important market for the entire semiconductor industry. And we are well engaged with the customer ecosystem there in terms of bringing value of our leading-edge products in memory and storage, helping them drive their innovation roadmaps.
We want to thank you so much for your time today, walking us through your numbers, through the industry with which is growing at such pace. Micron CEO Sanjay Mehrotra, thank you. Now turning our attention to the Department of Justice, holding a key press conference as they announce their antitrust suit against Apple, which has been 5 years in the making. We just want to be dipping in and bringing you some of those headlines. Of course, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, saying that Apple has monopoly power in the smartphone market. He's also been articulating that Apple has maintained power via exclusionary behavior at the moment. So we're going to be turning our attention, listening in to that press conference for a moment.
Today, the department alleges that Apple, one of the world's largest tech companies, crossed the line from rigorous competition to anti-competitive exclusion, unlawfully maintaining a monopoly in violation of the Sherman Act. The complaint makes clear that for years, Apple has tightened its grip on the smartphone market. It has done so not through product improvements, but by maintaining a chokehold on competition, locking its customers in to the iPhone while locking its competitors out of the market. As a result, and as the complaint details, Apple has gone from revolutionizing the smartphone market to stalling its advancement. This shift has smothered an entire industry, from users to app developers to the next generation of innovators. Apple's anti-competitive conduct must stop. 16 other attorneys general agree and have joined us in bringing this lawsuit against Apple. I want to thank the women and the men of the Antitrust Division for their commitment to promoting competition and protecting consumers and workers in all of their work. And I want to thank Assistant Attorney General Cantor for his leadership. Their work makes clear that no matter how
fast, the Deputy Attorney General there speaking, Lisa Monaco. But meanwhile, there's more breaking news, all focused in on Apple. I just want to bring you the headlines that Apple and Google are likely to be hit by the first investigations, the first probes under the EU digital law. So, of course, this is the DMA, which came into force just earlier this month. And, of course, there has been a keen eye on some of these labeled key gatekeepers as the EU singles out big tech. Apple and Google among them. The Digital Markets Act investigation could pave the way for fines, some big fines. Meta is also expected to be facing some scrutiny in the EU's big tech clampdown. So much to discuss from the EU and, indeed, what's happening right here with, of course, the Department of Justice and 16 attorneys general. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Anna Edgerton and Anurag Rana for more on this. Anna, I want to begin with you. And let's start with what has been the culmination of a 5-year investigation. The key takeaways as to where exactly Apple has been monopolistic and shutting out others from the market.
Yeah, so we have been expecting this complaint for a long time. It started in 2019 under the Trump administration. And we see how Jonathan Cantor, the Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust, has really tried to tell a narrative with this complaint. He's really tried to not just lay out the facts of what he alleges is anti-competitive behavior by Apple, but tell it in a compelling way so that it's not just being decided in a court of law, but it's also compelling to normal consumers who love their iPhones, love their Apple products. They can look at this complaint and see that this is behavior that's in some cases causing them higher prices, that could give them less choice. So that's really the goal of this complaint that could also help its chances in the court of law.
Let me bring in Bloomberg Intelligence senior analyst Anurag Rana. Anurag, I'm looking at the shares. We're down 3.4% at the low of the session. That decline of 3.8% put Apple on track for its biggest decline since August of last year. You and I have talked about this for years. Is the markets finally starting to price in the antitrust threat that Apple is facing?
I think as, product slowdown, antitrust risk. Apple doesn't have much going on right now. So it's going to be interesting to see what they pull out in June in terms of anything Gen AI, because other than that, it's going to be a very gloomy year for them in terms of sales growth.
Anurag, I want to follow up on that because this isn't just the US with its antitrust concerns. It's the EU as well, with Apple and Google being hit potentially by the Digital Markets Act, which has come into force. Ultimately, Apple has at the edges already been trying to change some of its business model, trying to appease with whether or not it's reducing certain payments that you're making for the App Store. But it seems to be begging from Peter to pay Paul. How much do you think Apple can change its business model without impacting its margins too much?
Yeah, I think the services business or the App Store business will see some depression, at least in the near term.
Anna, let's get back to this DOJ situation. I think it's worth for you re-explaining to our audience the basics here. The DOJ has been looking at Apple for like 5 years. It's the third time in a decade that they filed a suit. What are the specific allegations here?
This really focuses on the iPhone and the way the iPhone business runs and acts as a kind of moat around the business. As a long-suffering Android user who's always the green bubble in the family group chat, you can see how there are certain things that benefit iPhone users in being interoperable with other Apple devices. So that's really the behavior that this complaint lays out. And it's interesting that Biden's antitrust enforcers came in kind of pushing the bounds of antitrust law and wanting to really look at the behavior of these big American, especially tech companies. But when it comes down to this complaint, the harm that is really being laid out is consumer prices, which of course is classic antitrust. So there's an interesting balance between pushing antitrust law as far as it will go and really sticking to the arguments that they think will be successful in court.
Anna, as you mentioned, this has been long anticipated and has been going on for a long time. 5 years. It was under President Trump that this first investigation began. This is the third time, in fact, in 14 years that Apple has been focused on in this antitrust way from the DOJ. How quickly are we likely to see any real actions taken, any real implication in response from Apple?
Well, it's interesting that they filed the case in federal court in New Jersey, so we'll learn more about why that was the case. But we know they do want to move quickly on this. The Department of Justice has been a little frustrated with how slow their case against Google has gone. So the Justice Department also has more targets to finish up the rest of this year. They're working on another case against Google, so they have high ambitions. They want to take big swings, and Biden's first term is coming to an end. So there's definitely a big ambitions and limited resources and time to check all of those off.
Anurag, you really see a threat of this, giving consumers a window to jump to Android from iOS?
Oh, no, I don't think that's going to be the case, frankly, because those things are extremely sticky from that point. I mean, I don't think one bubble is going to make a difference for people to jump from the other. Apple's really loyal customer base. What I'm concerned about is, whether they can charge for the App Store in the same framework as they were before. I think that's going to be the bigger outcome in our view rather than anything else.
And so, Anurag, just interesting from the perspective that we are seeing this share price reaction down some 3%. That's not nothing for the second most valuable company out there. So do you think more weakness has to be factored in, even though they have a very loyal base that perhaps might not be shifting to an Android or competitor or on any changes to business models?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, services business is extremely important for them, both in terms of margin and diversification. If you compress those fees, it is going to have an impact on both their top line as well as the bottom line. So this is a new overhang on the stock that, tops up what's happening in Europe. So there isn't much going on for Apple this year. Sales are not growing in terms of the products, and now the service is under pressure. So, that's really what's happening here in our view.
Anna, behind every stock move, and Apple is down 3.3%, as I said, at the session low, 3.8%. There are some people, some human beings. Tell me about this DOJ team that was up on the stage one moment ago that are leading this antitrust initiative against Apple.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, Jonathan Cantor came into the antitrust division being labeled, Google's foe. We knew that, he had his sights set on big tech. And that's part of this kind of neo-Brandesian school of antitrust that we see also at the FTC with Lena Khan, the commissioner there. So, they've, in some cases, really worked together to reshape the understanding of antitrust law and really try to show how corporate behavior, even corporations that are well-loved, that produce products that people really enjoy, their behavior results in higher prices for consumers. So we see this also from the app developers like Spotify, Match, Sonos, who have complained for years that Apple's behavior puts them at a disadvantage competing with products like Apple Music. So that's all a part of this equation and is all going to be tried now in a court of law, and we'll see how it comes out.
I want to just return to you, Anurag, for a moment and just think about ultimately where Apple has to steer from now in terms of its overall prioritizations. As you said, there's a worry about generative AI and being behind the curve there. Will that stymie any relationship that it's trying to be brokering with Google? Will we still see sort of the ongoing build-up of Apple and its presence in generative AI and still trying to refocus the business when it is having to be distracted in this way?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the biggest thing that we find out over the next few months. If they are able to pull off this, we could say deal with Google, it's going to be symbiotic and beneficial for both the companies, and that has the potential to improve iPhone sales in the second half of this year. Barring that, there isn't much going on for Apple at this point, both in terms of, current status as well as, the outlook for second half.
Anurag Rana, fantastic analysis. Thank you for being there at the moment. Bloomberg's Anna Edgerton as well with a breakdown of this antitrust move and the years that it's taken to get here.
Apple actively encourages banks, merchants, and other parties to participate in Apple Wallet, but it simultaneously exerts its monopoly power to block these same partners from developing alternative payment products and services for iPhone users.
Merrick Garland, Attorney General, that is as the DOJ and 16 attorneys general weigh in, bringing enforcement to Apple at the moment, announcing an antitrust lawsuit against Apple. And of course, Ed, this is as we see the share price really being knocked by this, off by more than 3%. It is the second most valuable company out there, so that knocks some 92 billion off of its market capitalization overall on the day, trading at the lowest it's we've seen since the start of the year. And all of this ultimately should have been expected. It's a 5-year investigation.
That's the observation I'd make, though. So at the session low, the stock was down 3.8%, putting Apple on track for its biggest decline since August last year. Bloomberg reported all these details last night. And yet when the press conference came and the official confirmation came, the stock continued to slide. And if you go on your Bloomberg terminal, look at the street wrap, there is an acknowledgement of a regulatory overhang, which every time you and I talk about antitrust over the last few years, it never shows up in the stock.
Yeah. And then you have to add in on that the other Bloomberg scoop that came within this time of the fact that the EU is now weighing a full-blown investigation on its part as well into Apple and Google when it comes to the Digital Markets Act. So this is an antitrust global fixation on Apple right now.
Yeah, the one point on that EU reporting is that I think the EU is looking at a lot of people, Alphabet, and also we're reporting Meta, and that eventually that could lead to fines. So that is a story out of Europe that we'll continue to watch. There is another big story happening. We may have forgotten. Let's turn to Reddit, listing day. Here's some video of them ringing the bell at the NYSE earlier. Have a quick listen. I would say that, I say them, I don't think that's Steve Huffman in a mascot suit.
Oh, it'd be great if it was,
but I'm sure he was there. That was Reddit ringing the NY Stock Exchange bell earlier this morning. Let's get some of the key numbers with Bloomberg's Katie Roof, and we have an indication of where Reddit might open.
Yeah, so we don't know exactly where it's going to open just yet, but last night it priced at $34 a share at the top of the range, which was, a positive indication based on the roadshow and showing where, the street thinks it's going to open at. Right now what they're doing is they're sorting out the book. They're figuring out precisely, for the very, very first trade to the public where it should trade at, because the IPO is actually just for insiders. And so a lot of eyes are watching Reddit. There's been a dearth of tech IPOs in recent years. I mean, 2021 was a very active year with over 100, and then in 2022 there were 9, and then last year we only saw Instacart, Klaviyo, and ARM, for the big ones. And this week with Reddit and Astera, people are hoping might finally open that tech IPO window.
Just looking at this headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal, that Reddit shares indicated to open between $42 and $46 a share, clearly a premium on that $34 IPO pricing. There is interest in this one, right? It's been a long road because we thought they might go 2021. As you said, was an excellent year for US IPOs, and they didn't.
Yeah, they announced in 2021 they had filed for IPO. In 2022, I broke that they had hired bankers, and they did. It just took a little while for them to actually do it. But, I think it's a matter of, are people interested at what price? They priced at something that valued them above $6 billion, but they were last valued at $10 billion in 2021. And so, yes, there is interest in Reddit at this price, it looks like, especially if it's popping. But it's a matter of, will it be able to sustain that price? Will it be able to achieve the price it had in 2021 at market highs?
Mandeep Singh of Bloomberg Intelligence saying, yes, a $10 billion valuation is really where Reddit should be, Katie. But I'm interested in the allocation and where it went. When it was priced, of course, money flowing into institutional hands, but also into the retail investor and into the Redditors themselves. How much volatility might this add?
Well, I think it depends on whether these longtime Reddit users that got access at the IPO price are willing to stay Reddit stockholders. Part of the idea behind some of these consumer-facing companies giving access to their top users at the IPO price is the idea that these would be long-term stockholders. The IPO is only given to insiders, it's people that are close to the banks normally, and they get there's expected to be a pop on day one, and so it's seen as a gift that they get access to those gains on day one, and so this is meant to be a good thing for Reddit shareholders, Reddit users, and also for Reddit.
Yeah, Katie Roof has been across this IPO. We thank you so much for bringing it to us. And Ed, there's a question, of course, future growth drivers, not just being advertising, but AI too.
Yeah, that's the idea. Sell the very unique user data to the companies building large language models. And BI has this very wide range saying 30 to 85% of Reddit users only use Reddit. They don't use other social media platforms.
And really, it's that focus on the desire to be engaging there and what it means for some of these large language models as well for a future direction of travel when it comes to diversification of revenue. Now we want to welcome to our Bloomberg TV and radio audience worldwide Reddit's listing day. It's arrived. Let's bring in Reddit's Chief Operating Officer, Jen Wong, for more on the big day live from the New York Stock Exchange. Jen, it's a day to remember, and I'm interested as to really for you how much you are excited about Redditors having part of the process here, or worried a bit about the volatility to come?
Thanks for having me today. It's been our dream to have our users and our communities to be able to be shareholders in Reddit. Everything on Reddit is built by our users and communities, so having them be owners makes a lot of sense, and we're so excited about that.
Jen, good morning. It's Ed in San Francisco. What's the main benefit of the IPO? We always talk about the money raised, the dollar valuation, but I always reflect that an IPO gets your name out there. Not everyone is on Reddit. Not everyone is a Redditor. How do you weigh up the pros and cons of listing?
Well, there's certainly a lot of press on a day like today. It is a special day, but becoming a public company has just made us a better company. We've actually been in this process longer than most, almost 2 years actually, and that process has made us more disciplined, more operationally rigorous, and actually allowed us to get to know investors better and tell our story. And so this whole process has made us a better company, and we're prepared to be a public company. I think it's actually been really good for us. And I think companies that, can go public, it's sort of a duty. It's part of the, process of maturing as a company. And then the benefit of having our employees have liquidity, which we promise to them, and in addition have our communities and users be able to be shareholders, makes a lot of sense for Reddit.
Jen, the evolution of the story is for you moving away from a solely advertising-based business model to one where you license your user data to the companies that are building large language models. I just asked if you could explain to our audience how that works in practice, how you're going to grow that business.
Yeah, well, just ahead of addressing that, I just wanted to provide context. One of the things that's so special about Reddit is that we play in 3 big addressable markets. We have this core advertising business. Ads is a great business. It's still early. We have great traction and momentum. That's our core business. We have an emerging data licensing business that we built the foundations for last year because Reddit's corpus of information is incredibly important to the training of large language models and also for insights for different kinds of businesses. And the third is a user economy where our communities go beyond conversation into being able to transact with each other. Now, you asked about the data licensing business, which we built the foundations for last year. That has 2 pieces to it. It is a piece that's sort of well established where there's social listening for marketing for companies who want to understand what's happening on Reddit to inform marketing campaigns. There's also financial services companies who are interested in that. Those are well-established markets. And then there's the new emerging market of AI, where large language models need data to train on. And when you look at Reddit's corpus, 19 years of human experience organized by topic with moderation and relevance, that's incredibly important to building both a chat capability and the freshness of information. So that's an area where, we see opportunity. I think what that signals, whether it shows up honestly in our revenue or whether it shows up in the value of Reddit, is how valuable Reddit is. The more that we move toward this AI world, that corpus and that knowledge and refreshment of human experience becomes more valuable.
To our TV and radio audience, we are speaking with Reddit Chief Operating Officer Jen Wong. And to that ongoing value of your data to AI and to the large language models being developed, I mean, those LLMs, the models are being built in new and different ways. This actual technology also develops. I'm interested as to really whether this goes on in perpetuity. Do you see this sort of licensing being steady and secure for 10 years from now?
What I'd say is this is so early in this emergence of this technology. It's hard to see far out. The way I think about it, the way we think about it is the Reddit's corpus of data is incredibly valuable, and it gets more valuable because as there's more content that's generated maybe by AI or computers, original human thoughts and ideas increase in value, right? If you think about it, a new car comes out. Who's going to review it? A real-life family of 6 can actually tell you what it's like to drive that car. That's always going to be valuable. And so, whether that shows up in data licensing or in the products that Reddit builds, it is valuable.
Let's talk about a community that has been very valuable at times and extraordinary at others to Wall Street more broadly has been the Redditors who are very active on Wall Street. We go back to Wall Street Bets. We just think about what happened to GameStop, for example. There is a double-edged sword here for you involving your Redditors as investors. How secure are you that you won't become a meme frenzy yourself to the up and to the down?
Look, I love the ethos of that community and all of our investing communities. And who knows? I mean, it's Reddit, right? I mean, who knows what's going to happen? So we'll see. I mean, it's hard to say. But in the end, I think having our users and communities be shareholders is a good thing. And I think ultimately we'll be judged on our performance. And that'll take time for people to know. But ultimately, I think that's what investors judge us on.
Jen, we're awaiting the opening trade. Bloomberg reporting the indication is the stock will open somewhere between $42 or $46 a share. It's quite a premium on the IPO price. You're one of the biggest shareholders as well. Just give me your personal feeling in this moment.
It's kind of like a wedding day, I guess. Lots of different emotions, joy, relief, jitters, all of it in one. I haven't even processed it, frankly. But it is a special moment. It is one milestone in a history of a 19-year company that I think has a lot of runway. We're 19 years old, but we're really young as a company. And this is sort of the start of the next chapter.
Reddit Chief Operating Officer Jen Wong, live from the NYSE. We're grateful for your time on listing day.
Thank you.
Okay, time for VC Spotlight, and Sequoia has just wrapped up its AI Ascent event right here in San Francisco, which brought together some of the best and biggest minds in artificial intelligence. Let's bring in Sequoia Capital partner Konstantin Bühler to explain who was there. There were big names in the building. Why did you do that?
Well, first, Ed, Caroline, thank you so much for having me again. You're right. Yesterday we had 100 of the leading minds in AI. We brought them together because we wanted to discuss the state of the AI industry.
Just portfolio companies or the community at large?
Whole community, right? Not just portfolio companies. We're talking the leading minds in AI. We wanted to talk about the state of the industry today, but also where we're going, what's next.
And what was the conclusion?
Well, one thing I think will surprise your audience is that everybody knew that we had to be patient in this process. It feels like we started the AI process as a sprint, but everyone knows this is a marathon. So what's ahead of us is the long haul, and everyone's getting ready for that long haul.
Konstantin, I'm sure a topic of conversation must have been inflection, basically going in-house to Microsoft and, yes, licensing some of its technology. At the same time, you're speaking with the likes of the co-CEO of Anthropic, which has a deal with Amazon. You're also talking with Mistral, which has, of course, got a deal with Microsoft. How is that whole ecosystem ultimately building itself? There seems to be some very interesting partnerships that end up looking like M&A. How do you feel as someone who's putting money into these businesses?
Caroline, you're exactly right. There was a lot of talk about that. And one of the major trends that I think will surprise your audience is that the leaders were talking about how AIs are going to actually work together. So we were talking about this concept of networks of AIs. Not just are you going to have one AI, but you're going to have multiple AIs that are good at different tasks. And they're going to work together, cooperate, and compete. I'll give you a very tangible example. I use a product called Dust. It also happens to be a wonderful Sequoia portfolio company. It allows me to call both GPT-4 and Mistral Large, and also Claude 3 from Anthropic in parallel. I can have the models compete against each other. I can have them collaborate, and this yields an even better outcome. That's the future of AI. It's going to be many models working together in a network.
Another portfolio company being Hugging Face, which of course almost brings together the entire ecosystem in that manner. And there must be an awful lot of debate ultimately about, well, open versus closed. You've got OpenAI, and many would argue that OpenAI ain't that open anymore, and some would say for good reason. How are you seeing the overall AI community divide itself on how open large language models should be?
I'll tell you what we heard yesterday. We heard a lot of enthusiasm about open source. And frankly, it wasn't just from the builders. So a lot of the builders, of course, want open source so that they can run these models in their own clouds. But it was also from the application layer. We had CJ, the COO and president of ServiceNow, and he talked about how ServiceNow is using AI internally to deflect 20% of tickets. That's for IT stuff like ordering a laptop. That's for HR stuff like leave. And he made it very clear we need the open source because that's going to help us drive costs down. That's going to help us preserve margin. So customers want this. We've heard it from customers. We've also heard it from the founders and the builders.
Just a headline on the Bloomberg to make our audience aware. Reddit shares now indicated to open at $44 to $48 a share, a premium on the $34 that they priced the IPO at. We were just talking to Jen Wong at Reddit, the idea that they are an available data set for training large language models. The difference in the data is the focus of Redditors. They only use Reddit,
yes.
Right? Was that something you discussed about the availability of data and Reddit? I mean, what are people saying about that?
Absolutely. First of all, we're so happy for Reddit. This is an amazing milestone, and Jen just said it. An IPO is an important milestone in the journey. And this is an example of how the fact that they created an online community, a true community where they're actually working together, is going to pay off not just for advertising, that's the obvious business, but for data. We know they have a big partnership with Google, and we're going to see a lot more businesses like this that have accumulated that data advantage being partners for great AI products that need to train on that data.
Sequoia Capital partner Konstantin Bühler, great to have you back in the studio
great
here in
to be
San
here.
Francisco. What a day it's been, Caro. This, for now, is Bloomberg Technology.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Caroline.
We allege that Apple has employed a strategy that relies on exclusionary, anti-competitive conduct that hurts both consumers and developers. For consumers, that has meant fewer choices, higher prices and fees, lower quality smartphones, apps, and accessories, and less innovation from Apple and its competitors.
Attorney General Merrick Garland there of the Department of Justice speaking earlier today. Apple facing global antitrust allegations, of course, not only from the US but also the EU. We understand they're going to do a full probe of Google and Apple. EU Commissioner EVP Margaret Vestager told us this earlier in the month.
We see an illegal abuse that has been ongoing for a number of years, which has made it, virtually impossible for customers to choose if they want the payment service in-app by Apple, paying the fee, or they would want to go, for instance, to a website and have a cheaper subscription price.
Bloomberg's Mark Gurman for more. What's Apple's take?
Yeah, Apple certainly disagrees across the board on this lawsuit, implying that the lawsuit is not legal, saying the iPhone is not a monopoly, and pushing back heavily on the bevy of claims. The Department of Justice is going after Apple from everything from green bubbles to CarPlay to how iCloud storage is integrated, blaming Apple for hurting consumers, hurting choice, hurting developers. Certainly, Apple has squashed developers and made it difficult for developers to compete in some instances. On the other hand, a lot of this comes down to user interface and, philosophical decisions Apple made many years ago about its integrated experience. So we'll have to see where Apple is willing to meet the DOJ, how they can work together to create some solutions here to keep the iPhone still a secure integrated platform, but certainly it needs to get a bit more open and a bit more competitive for third-party developers and accessory makers.
The man who can explain the Apple philosophy, Mark Gurman, we thank you so much for jumping in on the news. And boy, that does it for this extremely busy edition of Bloomberg Technology.